Let's first talk about how you guys started and got into writing in the first place. Do you want to kind of talk me through that?
How did you get started, Ben? Because I don't know this story.
How did I get started in writing? Well, I always sort of wrote things. I think that's the key part of it. A lot of people forget that in writing. You actually have to write some things. So always would be writing sketches, and when I first came to London, a sort of group of out-of-work actors who I knew who wanted to be in things, we put on a little night together where I'd write sketches. But how I actually sort of got into being paid to do it, I think that's the key thing. Also, you want to be paid. I mean, everyone can say they're a writer, can't they? But you have to be paid to be it, is the other thing. Is me and my friend Peter, we wrote these letters, a bit like Henry Root letters. We pretended to be people, and we'd write letters to various institutions. Like we wrote a letter to the Bank of England saying, could we spend a day in their offices dressed as a fox? And we would get their replies, and we would engage in correspondence with them. And then we put all those together. We made a sort of tape of it. A tape for younger viewers is sort of like a podcast on some cling film. And we sent that tape to BBC Radio, and they spent about a year not getting in touch with us. And then after a year, they said, oh, why don't you make a pilot of this? This is quite good. And then we got an agent. And then the main thing that happened was that the agent suddenly rang us up and said, there's a show called The Jack Doherty Show, which was a sort of late night sort of talk show on Channel 5. And they said, they need some writers to start in 2 days' time. Why don't you go and do that? And so we did that. And as I remember, it was the day after Diana died, and they said you can write about whatever you like, but don't write about Diana. But there was no other news to write jokes about that day.
So what did you write about?
Literally, we were so baffled by what was happening to us that we sat in this room with lots of other really good writers who've gone on to do lots of really good things, and we were like, literally don't know what we're doing here. Like, never written on a TV show before, didn't know how it worked, didn't know what we were meant to be doing. All I was pleased about was that a runner came and made me a cup of tea every hour. And I thought, that was incredible.
You've made it.
And I thought, if I can get someone to make me a cup of tea every hour, this is exactly what I need to be doing.
It's like you've left home, but you haven't left home. It's a replacement for mum.
It was great. And you just had to write intros to guests. You have to write funny introductions to them. So we sort of did that for a bit, and that all seemed sort of fine. And that's how I sort of ended up, then went and did other shows. But that was sort of how I got into telly writing.
What about you, Joel? How did it all start?
We met at school. I mean, we've been doing this together since
I didn't know you'd known each other that long.
Yeah, we met when we were 17. And so basically we've been doing it since then.
We got banished from the playing fields because we both had this habit of running away from balls.
Yeah.
Which is not how
There's
you
not
play,
a position
apparently.
that does that on any sports team, is there?
No.
Turns
no.
out.
It still happens. My son was playing football a few weekends ago, and the ball came towards me, and I just ran away from it.
Someone said, what's the thing you're most terrified of? I said once, being passed a ball by a child in a park.
Yeah.
Can you kick it back, mister? No, you don't want that to happen. It will be ugly.
Yeah, so we got sent off the sports field, basically, and we got sent upstairs to type up the school newsletter in a place called the Computer Room, because that was a place where they had the computer. And we just started doing silly things. We did a spoof newsletter within 2 weeks, which we photocopied and did the rounds under tables, and that's how we started writing together.
How old were you at this point?
17. Yeah, and then we went and spoke to someone, a friend of a friend said, there's a career called comedy writing, and we went and met a guy who did it for BBC, and he said, well, there's no reason you shouldn't do this. It appears to be a job. He had a nice house.
He did.
He was from the era where you got paid a lot for comedy writing, when Johnny Spate used to have a Rolls Royce and things. So we went, this is brilliant. And then we did that and found out there wasn't any money in it, and you struggle around. But exactly the same as you, the thing that got us noticed was not waiting for permission. It was doing something. So this guy noticed us because we'd done this stuff at school and it looked quite good. It was quite professionally done. And then when we got into comedy, we started doing stuff on the internet. Around the same time as when Charlie Brooker was doing TV Go Home, we submitted some stuff to TV Go Home, and Charlie said, piss off, get your own website. And I said, how do you do that? And he went, it costs 25 quid. What are you doing sending stuff to me? You could have one of your own. So we started our own. And that, same as your tapes, the technology was really cheap, so it meant that you could do something which wasn't moderated by anyone else. It was your own voice, and actually that is what tends to get you noticed far more than sort of politely waiting for a brief or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that now that's even more possible. Like, because what you can do is you can make your own comedy show if you want to. Yeah. And I think, it is true that actually things you do on your own back, sort of for fun, if you can get them noticed, whether that's a tape or a website or whatever, are going to sort of be more interesting to people than, like, when you sort of imagine, I remember getting like the Guardian media section and like scouring it, thinking, where are the adverts for comedy writers?
Wanted, Python.
Wanted, Python-esque, surrealist sketches for late night. You think, where's that? Those jobs exist, so they never get advertised. But Charlie Brooker, I worked on, after I did the Jack Doherty show, I did a show called The 11 O'Clock Show that had like Sacha Baron Cohen and Ricky Gervais on it. And Charlie got to be writer on that because he used to do his TV Go Home, which was like a fake Radio Times pages. And he sent them in, and we looked at them and thought, well, this is really funny. But they weren't what we were doing on the show. They were just really funny bits of writing. And so we thought, oh, he seems quite a funny person. Come and work with us on this show.
It's a mistake about a career path, because we always used to get asked this. You get sort of say, well, what should you do? Where's the open door sketch show that young kids can write for? And you go, actually, those existed when I was coming out. We went to work for them. We were terrible at working for those. Getting us to write in someone else's style, especially when you're young and you're not very skilled at it, and you've got your own voice, and trying to force your voice into someone else's show is not the best showcase. Like Douglas Adams, I remember, who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, he worked for Weekending, which was the open door sketch show, for years, and couldn't get a single sketch on.
Ditto Richard Curtis.
Couldn't get a single
sketch for years,
on.
never got one sketch.
Really?
We wrote for them, couldn't get a thing on, because actually we were sort of young and didn't fit. And all those shows, they go, well, there's a great opportunity for you to write in this style. You go, well, actually, that's a very specific sort of writing and suits a very specific sort of writer. If you've got a crazy thing you want to do, then just go and make it, because someone will hear it and you will end up, do a podcast or a YouTube thing or something. The barriers to entry, you won't get paid, and you better be able to do it for nothing for a while. But you will
Which
get
is
to
like
it.
most jobs in this industry anyway.
It's like if you're an actor, you go and do theatre for fringe theatre for no money, but it shows what you can do, and people are always looking out for new people. And I think most people I know who've done well in comedy got recruited by doing something mental on their own, whether it's a Vic and Bob type sketch night or something.
You know, at the moment, this country started with them doing their own thing on YouTube.
People just do nothing.
People just do nothing did that. Someone sends me a clip of a thing, I'm much more, because I'm slightly lazy, much more likely to look at that and go, oh, that's quite funny, than if they send me a sort of treatment for a thing that I don't really know who they are or what the thing is, or even a script for a thing.
You'd rather just see it kind of finished, ready to go.
It doesn't have to be finished. It doesn't have to be like perfect. It's just like, what do you want in a comedy? A funny character, you know, doing something funny. It sounds quite boring when you put it that way. But if you can demonstrate that, it doesn't have to be like well put together, or they have to be, you know, look great. It just has to be like, that's funny. I'd like to see more
it's like
of
an
that.
actor going to an audition and kind of speaking you through how they might do the role.
Exactly.
You'd probably just rather see them do it.
Yeah.
But also, it requires imagination. And the other thing as well is that, as we joked about earlier on, everything in production is a compromise. So there's always a brilliant idea at the front. And what tends to happen in professional life is you're trying to find people to work with who won't compromise your vision along the way. People who are sympathetic, good actors, good producers, good directors, good script editors. When you start out and you're writing something for like an open door sketch show, you probably aren't working with people who are completely on your level. So the stuff you do when you're a writer on the Jack Doherty show or the 11 O'Clock show won't be your best work, because you're working with people who've got a standard format that you fit into, and you might not show yourself off to your best ability. But if you're doing it on your own, no one's in your way. You can express everything you can do, and the best showcase for you is just, what would you do if everyone left you alone? And that's very often where people are found who are performers. They will have been doing a character in the clubs or whatever, with no one telling them how to do it. And actually that's a better demonstration of what your voice is than what you did well behaved for a headmaster at the BBC. Is that
Right.
That's true, but obviously the thing is that along the way you are going to have to write for other people,
Yes.
and it's actually a really useful lesson to find out what you're crap at.
Yes.
Because, for instance, we can write for Charlie with great facility and ease, and for Kevin Eldon similarly, but we did one day writing for Paul O'Grady, hopeless at it.
Really bad?
We did one
See, that's
tryout on
really
Have I Got News,
interesting.
and we were rubbish at Have I Got News.
Why do you think this dream team I've got in front of me right now, why does it work?
Because we got the same voice as Charlie, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's that. I mean, I think you know this more than I do, because we've known Charlie for years anyway, probably through TV Go Home and things like that. That we'd sort of known him as an internet guy, and I did some work on computer magazines years ago with Charlie.
Computer magazines.
What a
quaint
thing from the past. when they were the new smash hits. Brilliant. But we'd known him for ages, but we only worked on Wipe a little way in, and I think Charlie had tried loads of writers, all of whom were great writers, and none of whom had quite exactly got his voice. And when we were going in there and someone saying that we were producing loads of work, and someone said, "You're writing this really easily," and it was an interesting one because it was a quite high bar because the show was good, and we came on a couple of series in. And we were finding it really easy to write in Charlie's voice, and other people.
I thought that'd be really difficult to come in almost halfway through something that's already going, a project that's already off the ground.
Second series of things are quite easy, aren't they?
First series are terrible. When no one knows what it is,
or the cast.
Everyone's got a huge hill to climb. But if you come in when the thing's established, you know exactly what the rules are.
We've done it on a lot of shows. You can watch the first series and know what they want. But with Charlie, it was obvious what the show was, and everyone had worked out what it was, and it was obvious where Charlie's character was and things like that. So we found it a really easy ride, and actually I think because of that it meant that when we were writing loads because it was effortless. You could fill pages and pages in a day, and I think it's because similar background, similar interests. I find it quite easy to write.
You say you do pages and pages in a day. I'd be interested to know what a day, if there was a camera in the writer's room with you three, what does a day look like?
We don't tend to be in the same room, do we?
Oh, really?
We're not allowed to meet you very often.
Oh,
this is the first time I've met you.
It's sort of, I don't know. See, so when so an interesting thing about writing is that often the more you establish yourself as a writer, the less you actually write down.
Yeah.
So with Charlie, and if you're working with different, talent presenters, whatever, they all work in different ways. With Charlie, how I wrote with him is simply to talk to him and have somebody else write it down.
Yeah.
So someone's literally scribing in the corner.
But not necessarily trying to be funny. I'm just sort of, Charlie talks a lot.
Yeah.
So if you ask him a question like, what do you think about that? He'll tell you the answer, it'll probably be quite funny, and someone else will write it down. He'll write it down a bit. Or you'll watch a lot of the sort of weekly wipe shows were about TV. You'd watch a TV programme and sort of shout things out at it. Like, he looks like this thing, or this looks like a scene from this film.
Right.
And someone else will write that down. So after a bit, you don't have to actually, use your fingers. And I'm surprised they haven't sort of atrophied off and sort of withered away on me.
That's interesting that you guys aren't together physically.
Usually you'd be in the room with Charlie doing that. We would be like a B unit. We'd be in a separate room, and we'd be given tapes and things to watch or a list of things to talk about. And we would go through and we both type. So we type a lot. So we would type to the page, and our aim was to fill as many pages as possible with potential gags. So Charlie would get probably quite a good discursive stuff from you, and then you get from us quite detailed, bullet-pointed pages and pages of...
Off the back of that
David
discussion.
Miliband looks like this today, or this... how about saying that the persecution of benefits... people with benefits is a little bit like X and Y. So there'd be sort of ideas and things. And so Charlie then gets both things in.
But Weekly Wipe is like a topical show, so you might run multiple writing rooms during it so that you can actually get all the writing done within the week period you've got to do it. Whereas Cunk, we do sit in a room together occasionally, right at the beginning, where we discuss the issues that we're about to bring up. Because it's not a topical show, you can sort of do that a bit more leisurely in that sense.
The interesting thing about almost everything we do is comedy. You think comedy is just silly, but almost all of it involves a layer of research first before you can start the comedy, either reading the news or in
And
Cunk.
especially something like Cunk as well.
We don't know anything about history, so we had to sit with a big pile of Ladybird books and Osborne book of... I still don't know which Mary's which in that. Right to the end, we were going, I don't know which Mary this is.
We got to the bit where we were looking at the War of the Roses, and we went, this is so difficult to understand that we actually just wrote a line, I think, where she just says the War of the Roses is just too difficult to understand, so we'll skip that bit.
But yeah,
because we just thought that sometimes you just throw your hands up and go, no, I've got nothing.
But it's surprising how much
too hard.
The first
Bitcoin,
bit of the process.
Charlie asked us to write about Bitcoin once, and we sat and read about Bitcoin and went, there's no way I can understand this. This is like quantum physics. It's not going in, so I can't write any jokes about it.
But actually, specifically with Cunk as well, because you're talking to an audience, the joke with Cunk, one of the jokes with Cunk is that the audience is cleverer than she is. And the joke is, why have they given a show to someone who knows less about this than me? So weirdly, you have to, no matter how deep we research into a subject,
You've almost then got to rewind.
Yeah, we have to go, well, what do people know? So it tends to be, the Cunk on Britain was good because it was stuff you learned at school. It was Horrible Histories level, probably less clever than Horrible Histories level facts. You go, well, Henry VIII stood with his legs apart. It's that level of, what do you remember knowing? As soon as you get into a thing where you're talking about Thomas Wolsey and Thomas Cranmer and all the different Thomases, and you go, oh, the audience don't know which Thomas is which, so we can't do a joke about that. Because the audience have to be a step ahead of her. So it's really odd. We did one on architecture, I think, A Moments of Wonder. I don't know if it even got broadcast, because we went, oh God, once you get past Sir Christopher Wren and Frank Lloyd Wright, no one really knows any architects. And you think that'd be a great subject for her, because it's quite highfalutin and she can stand in buildings. But we realised there were about 3 jokes about buildings that really everyone knew. The agreed areas of ignorance.
I always wonder, as a writer or as a team of writers, do you, once you've written the script and you've got it, do you let that go and then it's over to the director, or how much involvement do you actually have, especially when it comes to bringing that script to life?
You pass it on, really, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, we start as a room, don't we? And then we go away and write lots of bits. And we don't actually, in the case of Cunk, we don't really write script, we just write lines. And then Charlie gets a go at it, and he decides which lines win and which ones get into the script. And then it goes to production. And separately, you have to write the interview questions for when Diane is talking to someone.
I need to know how these interviews work.
Everyone asks this.
Yeah, yes. I bet they do. Because how in on it are the people being interviewed?
100%. At the beginning, when this was decided, it's interesting, the 11 o'clock show coming up, because we said we wanted to have a character who did some interviews. We had Al Campbell was playing a character called Barry Shitpeas, who was like an ignorant pundit, and we said it'd be good
with a bandaged hand
to have a female Barry, and that was where Philomena came from. And then we said, thank Charlie, or you suggested, what if Philomena did some interviews with people, because we hadn't done that with those pundit characters before. And then we all went, we thought about Ali G and I don't know, was it Tribute the Dog and Dennis Pennis, the people who did Triumph, whatever it was called. Those things where there'd been marks, you drop someone in and they interview a celebrity, and the idea is that the celebrity is either embarrassed or you tell a truth to them or whatever. And we said, there's a cruelty to it, and it had been done so much.
Well,
and that's where the decision came from, did it, to go, we're actually going to let them in?
I think the idea was that, I don't I mean, maybe other people might have a different thing. I don't want anyone to be embarrassed, particularly not the mark. And also, I don't think there's anything embarrassing about knowing everything in the world about Napoleonic shipping. I think that's a good thing that you've done with your life. And there will be a level of it where you went, you idiot, you're a dry academic. And I think the funnier joke is, the funnier joke is that...
Because you can see them smirking sometimes.
The joke should be on Cunk, a little bit.
Yeah.
But the joke is definitely on the production team, I think. Why have they sent this woman in with such a bad briefing set of notes to waste this academic's time?
It's offensive. Simon Russell Beale chatting about Shakespeare with her was one of the most...
looking at her phone.
Yeah, looking at her phone. And that's where I thought...
so much thinking.
Does he know?
Yes.
And is he incredibly offended, or...
As far as I know, you may know better, but as far as I know, they're told, look, you've got to treat this interview like you were being interviewed by a child. So go along with it, go along with the kid,
right.
But be yourself. Don't fake anything. So some of them, there was one guy who really lost his shit with it because she kept asking him about why medicine wasn't available on Monster Munch. Yeah. And, he was a medical historian, I think, and he was going, what are you talking about? What's Monster Munch?
But
it's great. So it's natural.
They can get lost in her world is smaller than theirs and doesn't share any values with theirs. But I think a lot of the people you end up talking to are academics or people who work in institutions, and they're used to having school trips come round. So if you say it's a gobby 9-year-old who thinks they know everything,
right,
and also who thinks they know enough, and I think it's an oddly weaponised joke now, because I think the problem with the world is that everyone thinks they know enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, because so on the 11 o'clock show where Ali G was on, you know, we could send him to interview people, even though the show was out, and because Google was in its infancy. No one could Google Ali G and find out if he was a real deal or not.
Right, yeah.
These days, it's very hard to do these sort of mock interviews where people are totally in the dark about who's talking to them.
Especially as the series does better and better.
As soon as someone says, oh, this woman Philomena Cunk's going to come to interview, whether you know her or not, you Google her and you go, oh, I think she's somehow humorous. So you can't do so easily that kind of real, like, pulling the wool over people's eyes interview as you used to be able to, because the internet has made it harder.
I think the prank level of it is funny to a certain degree, but I think that ages very quickly. I think it's been nice to sort of say to the academics, do you want to join in on this? And I think on Cunk on Britain there were a couple of long takes where I think Ronald Hutton was really good, and he defended his discipline and the discipline of history really eloquently in the face of her going, I'm not interested. And I thought there are very few programmes on television that would let Ronald Hutton defend his discipline. Because she was being so thick, it was worth leaving the camera on him going, why are you asking these stupid... It is worth knowing this. And actually it felt like quite a highbrow accidental result.
And actually, now the experts are queuing up to be interviewed because they really want to be in on the fun, you know.
Right.
Like the best responses to Cunk on Britain came from historians.
Yeah.
Just crowds and crowds of historians who dropped us a line or said on Twitter, oh my God, this is great.
We talked to...
they like it.
We talked to Dan Snow and Janina Ramirez about it. They talked about Cunk with us. And they do these kind of programmes. And I said, God, it was so hard making Cunk on Britain because we had no time. We were trying to make something that looked like a high-end series with no time, no budget, driving all over the country, and it was raining, and Diane was freezing cold. And they
I
went,
was going to say, she sometimes does literally a 9-second piece to camera and then we're in another location.
It was done
It
to
must
look like
be a
that.
nightmare.
I think it was exhausting, actually.
And they both said, but that's what it's actually like. And I went, oh, even if you're David Attenborough, there's never enough time. The logistics are appalling. I went, oh, so that lovely thing where the parody becomes convincing because it's exactly the same process as the real thing's made it.
Can we talk about Diane Morgan? Because she's brilliant and she's pretty integral to kind of pulling off the tone of the whole thing. I mean, how much is she allowed to go off the writing and improvise, or does she tend to, when you guys watch it back, do you go, yeah, that's pretty much what we wrote?
Yeah, it's loads, but it is off.
I feel that I should point out at this stage, which sounds like I'm boasting, but she's my girlfriend.
No, oh really?
So he doesn't like
So I have a
I'm
very
glad I said she was
biased
good.
opinion of...
I think she's terrible. She's an awful person.
but anyway, that just pointed that out for viewers at home.
Okay. Do you ever sit and watch it with her?
Yeah,
And go, that's not what I wrote?
I definitely I watch it with her. You know, the real advantage is I can sort of get her to help me write it, because I just say to her, what do you think about the Bayeux tapestry? And she'll go, the what? And I go, yeah, that'll do.
Actually, you don't have to do what we do, because there's a friend of ours.
Oh my gosh! The couch is gone!
Comedy. Oh, that was brilliant.
Shall we do the rest of it standing?
Get the sandbags in. Okay, the sandbags are in place.
Right.
The couch is fixed. Nobody move.
Yeah, okay, we'll just stay very, very,
Very
still.
still.
Please, we've only got like 2 more
I'm
questions.
just moving my eyes. Is that
That's
all right?
absolutely fine.
One of your eyes is quite heavy.
Yeah.
I think we were talking about Diane and how great she is.
We can keep doing that.
Yes, I mean, let's spend all the last 2 minutes doing that. She obviously, what she does is the sort of linky bits where she's walking around talking, they're the bits we script. In the interviews, I think that's where she throws more of her stuff in, and sometimes that stuff is just literally what she does with her eyes, I think, and how she reacts to people. Sometimes those a lot of the questions we've written, the questions, her follow-ups are obviously based on what the person says, and she throws a lot of like visual
reactive,
stuff,
isn't
and
she?
she's very reactive. And I think that it's the looks she pulls sometimes that create the kind of
And you
the
can't script
grammar
those.
of that interview.
And I suppose you only know to an extent where the interview's going to go, and if it takes a left turn, I guess
Exactly,
she's just got to
Otherwise,
roll with it
you're
then.
constantly writing Bandersnatch. You're writing all these different things that can go different directions, which is impossible. But we've done it where usually we supply a huge number of questions, but you've booked an academic and they're sitting there for an hour. So she runs out of questions quite quickly, and then she goes off-piste, and sometimes that's the best stuff.
So the interviews are filmed for about 2 hours, I think, and sometimes you use 45 seconds, you know?
Does she realise, and you will know, how funny it is and how funny she is?
She has no idea. She thinks that she's making a serious programme.
Actually, do you want to know a real truth that's really lovely? Is that because she's so good at deadpan, what people don't realise is that Diane is one of the best laughers. When you're actually working with her, she laughs so openly. She's a really good reactor. She finds it all really funny.
She's always laughing at me.
But people find it, they assume that she's going to be like that in real life. And the point is, she's a very generous laugher. So you know when stuff's funny because it's making her laugh. And then when she goes into character, it all shuts down. But I think that's the real skill, is that her natural tendency to giggle at stuff, she can switch off.
She has to tell other people off when she's interviewing someone and there might be a member of the crew starts laughing because it's funny, she tells them off because she wants
Really?
Breaking the
it
atmosphere.
has to be complete. Because you can't use it, is the most obvious thing. You can't use it if someone's laughing in the background.
Yeah, of course.
And I know you quickly wanted to touch on the kind of toolkit, as it were, for when you're writing the show.
Well, the thing is that Charlie describes Cunk as an absence of character, so she's got no hinterland whatsoever. We tried to introduce a bit here and there, and I think there will be some in the future. But
She's got a
basically,
friend called Paul.
She's got a
That's all
friend
we
called
know.
Paul, who we're sort of swinging into action now. My mate Paul. But so it's quite hard to write because there's a very limited toolkit. You have to get things wrong. You can play with the language of things. She often takes the N at the front of a word and thinks it's the N at the back of Anne. So she thought apocalypse was 2 words, apocalypse, things like that. So you can, there's very little room, very little wriggle room
that's a
for
gag
writing
that I'd
it.
say the best ones of those gags are not just ones where there's just a pun or something, but it reveals something about her. And apocalypse says, I've never read this, I've heard it. There's something funny in her being someone who's only heard people say things. She doesn't read books and newspapers. A lot of those gags, which on the surface is just a pun, you go, well, actually, there's a little bit of backstory to it, and you go, actually, I bet she hasn't read this properly, or I bet she hasn't seen this, or I bet a friend of hers referred to this and she's picked it up as second hand. You can do that stuff. There's a nice gag we did in the book we did where her foreword, she wrote the preface, and instead of saying Philomena Cunk, London 2016, it said Philomena Cunk, Chessington World Adventures 2017, implying she'd written it on a roller coaster. And I like the idea that she wouldn't have done the work, she'd be doing it literally, not on the train going in, but she's having a day off and she's quickly written the preface. I like the ones where there's that extra level of, what's her life like?
Love that. Before the couch breaks again and we all fall on the floor or a church bell goes off or something, guys, thank you so much and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.